Another week, another video, or last week's video, then you know I am battling through the final hours of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and while I haven't had time to jump into any other games at the moment as I'm trying to, get Final Fantasy VII Rebirth out of the way, working my way through that game did get me on the train of thought of what other remakes are out there, or what other remakes are in development. And apparently there's a whole bunch that I forgot about, and you probably did too, because we've heard absolute zilch on some of these games for quite some time. So as I'm not playing any other new games right now, I thought I might as well ramble about these. Anyway, let's jump into it. First up, Dead Space 2. Which you probably didn't actually forget about this one, or you did forget about it until there was all that hoo-ha last week about whether it's been cancelled or not. I've played all of the Dead Space games, really enjoyed 1 and 2, 3 not so much. Played the remake of 1, had a great time with it, and then it just left my brain immediately, and I feel like the hype around it kind of came and went very quickly. I don't think it did amazing in terms of sales, but it was a good remake. It was a good time, and I think Dead Space 1 was never the best one in the series. Dead Space 2, in my opinion, is kind of the peak. So I was kind of looking at this game from the perspective of, I want to support this project because one of my favourite games from the 360 era could potentially get remade if this one does well. Currently, everything is up in the air. EA is handling not only another soft reboot of Battlefield, but they're also handling that Black Panther game and the Iron Man game, and we don't know. There's words of developers being pulled left and right of like, oh, we need you to work on this and we need you to work on that. I don't know if this remake is actually going to happen now. So I guess we just kind of have to wait and see, but fingers crossed. What else can I say? EA, make good decisions, please. Dead Space 2 is one of the best games you put out in the last 20 years. Don't pull out of this one. We're moving on. Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time. Remember that remake? Remember that trailer? Remember that trailer we got like 2 years ago? It might have even been longer than that. Yeah, we got a real janky looking trailer, and I don't know if it was the reception to that trailer or just Ubisoft took a look at their own trailer and said, oh, let's back it up here. If I remember right, that Prince of Persia remake was being handled by a studio in India, making their very first game. This is the first time they were given a full game of their own, and the initial look or impressions of that game did not go down well, apparently, and I don't know if they took it off that Indian-based studio or if they gave them a load of help, but it got pushed back, it got delayed. It was supposed to come out within like a year of that trailer or something, and then I've not heard anything since, and it's definitely been at least a year and a half. I would have just as easily have taken a Prince of Persia 1, 2 and 3 HD remaster, because those games still hold up. There's multiple Prince of Persia games in the works right now, so who knows if that Sands of Time game will even see the light of day. But boy, did that Prince of Persia trailer look rough. Speaking of Ubisoft, there is also a Splinter Cell remake out there somewhere. They haven't shown any gameplay, they haven't shown any sort of like engine stuff. The only thing we have seen so far, and again I'll be playing this footage right now, it was just some weird developer interview thing with flashes of concept art coming, like they're remaking that first game. How faithful they're sticking to that first game, I'm not entirely sure. They talk roughly about modernising it, and as a huge fan of Splinter Cell and wanting to see it return, as it's basically been dead since like 2013, I think that series has a lot of potential. But again, we've heard nothing, and I think two sort of like E3 periods have passed, and we've seen, nothing again. But this is a remake that I'm kind of heavily invested in because I'm hoping it could kickstart a new wave of Splinter Cell games. The trouble is when you don't hear anything in such a long time, it only serves as a red flag. But whatever happens, all I'm kind of asking for real is just that first game. Just remake that first game with today's tech. A lot of the work has already been done for you there. So that's kind of all I'm asking for, is just remake those, and you've got my money, along with a whole bunch of other people who have been asking you to bring back Splinter Cell for God knows how long. You know what? People didn't ask for that. And then I don't think anybody asked for a remake of Until Dawn. And when I say this, I don't mean any disrespect to Until Dawn. I played Until Dawn back in the early PS4 days. Great time, nice little horror game. What's really confusing to me actually is that they're not remastering it and re-releasing it for the PS5. They are remaking it from the ground up on Unreal Engine 5, but it seems like a hell of a lot of work for a game that, while was received fairly, like, it didn't do gangbusters. It didn't sell in the tens of millions. Like, it's for a game that did okay, but to the best of my knowledge did not break any records in terms of sales numbers. Seems like a lot of work, especially considering, like, dude, don't PS4 games work on a PS5 anyway? So I'm going to be interested to see what that thing looks like and how they justify putting in so much work. And the same applies for our next game, Silent Hill 2. It has been held up over the years as one of these survival horror masterpieces, and so when you're bringing a game back from that generation, you automatically have my attention. But the Silent Hill franchise in general has, boy, I mean, that franchise has not been doing so well recently. There have been a lot of missteps and mistakes with the handling of Silent Hill in a way which, like, if you're a fan of that franchise, you must be looking at Resident Evil fans just filled with nothing but hatred, nothing but rage, because the trailer for that remake that we did get not too long ago, but it didn't seem to make that big of a splash. The trailer that we got for that one looked a little like it looked like that game needed some more work. I can't remember the exact date, or if they had a date for when that thing was called, but it looked like it needed a little more time in the oven. And on the other side of things, you got Resident Evil, or Capcom, sorry, is like pumping out these great Resident Evil games like every 2 years without fail. Like, it's absolutely hilarious to me to watch Konami look across the road at Capcom and see their success and just make no attempt to emulate any of that. This feels like another game that Konami is putting out because they feel like they have to rather than they want. Talking of Konami, Snake Eater. You know what? I'm not actually going to cover this one for too long. I'm not going to speak too much on it. Metal Gear Solid for the PS1 is my favourite game ever. Metal Gear as a franchise is first or second in my favourite franchises ever. This is the franchise that got me into games. I'm going to hold off on speaking about it in great detail, or this remake in great detail, until we get like a little bit more information and a second trailer, because I feel like that's an entire video in itself. What I have seen so far visually looks okay. A Metal Gear game being made without Kojima seems a bit weird. Initially I was a little confused by the idea of, okay, why are they doing Snake Eater first, but then again, I guess eventually I came around to the idea of, well, oh yeah, of course you're doing Snake Eater first because it's technically the first one in the timeline, so I suppose for newcomers it would make sense. Long story short, I am as cautiously optimistic as a person can be about that. I am desperate to know more, and once we get another trailer, don't worry, you'll be getting a 20-minute video from me on that one. Anyway, what's next? The Witcher. Why are they remaking The Witcher? The Witcher, so CD Projekt Red, from what I understand, is both working on a remake of the first Witcher game while also working on The Witcher 4. That seems like I'm on board. I really like The Witcher. I can understand why you would want to go back and remake the first Witcher, but at the same time, if you're making a Witcher 4, it's kind of like, well, what do you want? They kind of seem like conflicting sort of ideas to me. But I could be just reading it wrong. But to be working on both at the same time, it seems a little strange. But I can't quite put my finger on how I feel about a Witcher 1 remake. Like, I'm on board in theory. I want to know more. But my understanding was that The Witcher 1 was a very different game. So it depends on how faithful you want to be to that first game. We've not seen or heard anything as of yet, so it's very easy to forget that they are working on it in general. But hey, more Geralt, why not? Next up, we've got Resident Evil. Or, well, technically 2 Resident Evil games, because I've heard rumours of both and no confirmation on either. That remake train is not stopping anytime soon for them because it is doing as well as it's doing. But there are rumours out there of both a remake of Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil Code Veronica. Both games which were somewhat underwhelming at time of release for different reasons. In fact, that's the hilarious part about this to me, really, is that if you had asked me what game they should remake next, I would have said Resident Evil 1. There is a structure and a gameplay loop to those remakes that is incredibly addictive to me, and I would love to see the first game made in the style of 2, 3 and 4. But word on the street is it's either 5 or Code Veronica, or potentially both. Capcom is probably sitting there in their offices thinking, which one do we do now? And the only choices they have now, they've already remade the peak of the series, which is kind of that 2 to 4 stretch. They don't really have any other options now other than to remake the ones that are slightly less impressive, and they definitely don't need to remake 6. Like, stay away from that. But I guess we just wait and see. Either way, I'm super interested. Do they go back and change that game? That's probably the most interesting question for me. Also on the list of remakes, we have KOTOR, a game which was sort of cancelled but not cancelled. There's like once every few months I hear a different rumour about that game of whether it's actually still in production. I don't quite know who to believe. I would like to see a remake of that game. The question I had from the start, really, to tackle KOTOR seems like a ridiculous amount of work. If you are going to remake and modernize that game, you've got a lot of like assets to create and a lot of like open world areas to. You could technically remake that game and keep the structure and the layout exactly the same and just upgrade the visuals, but that would make that game feel a bit strange in 2024 because while it was technically open world, it was a lot of linear paths and sort of hub worlds, not totally open. But if you were going to remake and expand upon that to bring it up to modern day, I can't even fathom the amount of work that would take. But hey, KOTOR 2027, Darth Revan and all, I'm ready for you. Final game of the bunch, and arguably my most anticipated, Max Payne 1 and 2, being remade by Remedy with a very large budget. And the reason this is my most anticipated, again, huge fan of this franchise. Remedy have been doing some really good work for, they've been on a great run for as long as I can remember. Quantum Break was a bit but other than that, I've loved everything that they've took. So when you tell me that team has a boatload of money to remake two of my favourite from the 6th generation, whatever you want to call that generation, boy am I excited. Bullet time and dual wielding, diving around, like all that detective noir stuff, some of the set pieces, like give it all. I want all of it. I want every little bit of it all over again in the best visuals that you can provide. The only real shame here about this remake is that we've sadly lost the voice actor for Max Payne, who passed away last year. So the game's going to feel a little different, but yeah, I'm dying to know more about this, especially how they handle, because some of the story bits in that game are rough. The opening to that first game is rough. Like, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but quite possibly one of the worst things that could happen to a human like happens in the opening of that game. I still feel slightly uncomfortable every time I play that opening, especially now I have a wife and child myself. And when you tell me you're going to recreate that in 4K, like, good lord. So that's all the remakes I know about at the moment. Please feel free to let me know if there's some that I've missed. And I suppose that's going to do it for this one.